Hi everyone, welcome to our DIY accent wall masterclass. I'm very happy to host everyone who signed up for this webinar, and I hope it's going to be very useful to everyone. So let me share my screen here, and we'll get started. So I'll just do the introduction first. My name is Nick. I'm the owner at Calgary Custom Concepts here. We are a finished carpentry company based in Calgary, Alberta, and we specialize in accent walls, as well as coffered ceilings, wainscoting, but most specifically accent walls. And we want to, beautify all the homes in our area by adding accent walls. And we thought, hey, why don't we expand this offer so we can, you know, teach other people how to do accent walls. We can only serve locally in our community, so we want to teach everyone else how they can do it. So let me share this here, and let me know if everyone can hear me okay. Type yes in the chat. You should be able to type there in the chat if you can hear me. I just want to make sure. Yep, okay. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here. So the chat's enabled. You can submit any questions that you have here on the questions tab as well. We're going to do questions at the end of the session. But if you have any comments, you can put them in here, and I will also be asking some questions so you can interact in the chat here. So the session is being recorded. You're going to get a link to this later, and we do encourage you to take notes as you follow along. We're going to cover a lot. I'm going to try and give you as much information as I possibly can. I've been doing this 10 years. There's a lot. It might come at you like a fire hose. So take down some notes, and then you can review that later and apply it to whatever project you have in mind. Afterwards, we want to hear your thoughts. So we're going to send you a feedback form to find out what you thought. And of course, you're going to get access to the workshop resources. There's our PDF guide, the inspiration catalog, and our custom accent wall guide or accent wall application for creating your own accent wall. So let's get started. Like I said, a little bit about me. I'm a red seal carpenter. I studied at Conestoga College. It's a very, very well-known technical college in Ontario, in Waterloo. Renovation technician was the name of the program. Then I did a 4-year apprenticeship. I started Nick's Carpentry was my company in 2018. And this is my current company. We're at the offices here in Calgary, Calgary Custom Concepts. Some more fun facts. I'm an author. This is my book, Optimism 2033. It's unrelated to carpentry. And I was formerly a firefighter. So this is what you're going to learn today. So style inspiration. So we're going to talk about the different types of accent walls, what those look like. So that if you don't have a design in mind already, you can get inspired based on that. We're going to talk about the tools you need, what you don't need, where you can buy them, where you can find them, how to do it on a budget. Because, when it comes to DIY, we want to maximize how much we can get done for our dollars. Then we'll go through a step-by-step guide. We have some demonstrations, some video. I'm actually going to show you live how to do some of the steps so that you know exactly what that looks like. And then we'll talk about the additional resources. So we're going to, actually, let's go back here. So what are you looking to get out of here is the question. So do you have a project in mind that you're already planning to work on? So if you have a project, you can put that in the chat and say, yeah, I want to do an accent wall. I want to do some wainscoting. Are you doing something in the kitchen and living room? Where are you going to put that? You can put that into the chat. And so you can type that in. The other question is, how confident are you in doing your own DIY accent wall? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being, I have no idea where to start. I don't know which end of a hammer to hold. That's a 0. Number 10 is, yeah, no problem. Like the back of my hand, I know what I'm doing. I'm just checking out this course for fun. So scale of 1 to 10, you can put in the chat there as well. How do you feel about an accent wall, being able to do it yourself? Okay, so we got a 2, we got a 1. All right, Okay, perfect. You're in the right place. So this is the right place to start because we're going to walk you through all the steps, and that's the goal. Is by the end, you're going to have your confidence, several notches higher than you are right now. So we're going to get right into parts of an accent wall. And having a look at this, how many of these words do you recognize? We have rails and stiles, baseboard, casing, chair rail, top cap, panels, panel moldings, boards. Mhm. Oh, yes, we can. Thanks for, there we go. We can make that bigger. We have boards, miter joints, and butt joints. So you can put in there, are these all new terms to you? Have you ever seen any of these before? Okay, a few of them. So we will go over that right here. So here's a handy little diagram. So door casing, and let me activate this. So door casing is what you have around your doors. Pretty standard. It's just a square frame. Now this is an example of wainscoting. So baseboard, every house is going to have baseboard and casings. Those are very standard. What might be new terms that you haven't seen before are rails, stiles, and panels. So on almost any paneled wall, it's going to be made up of rails, stiles, and panels. And on top, you're going to have a chair rail. So let me show you what a chair rail can look something like this. And this is what would sit typically on top of wainscoting. You would have a chair rail. And a way to remember this is that rails, it's like the rung of a ladder. So they're always horizontal. And stiles are always vertical. So you think of a turnstile, you're going in the subway, it's mounted on a vertical post. So we've got rails and we've got stiles. And here's another example. So this is some more wainscoting. You see we have the stiles, they're still vertical. The rails are horizontal, but in this case, they're sloped. And then inside of here, we have a panel molding, and it's a little small, but I'll show you. A panel molding is a smaller trim, is a small piece of trim like this that goes inside of these panels. So you can see here we have boxes, and those are panels, panel molding inside of it. And these fancy decorative patterns, those are appliques, because as the term suggests, they're just applied onto the wall. So you have these appliques if you want to make your accent wall look a little fancier. So here's some more details on a raised panel molding. So we're going to go between what differentiates this from applied moldings. So here is an applied molding. What that is just a piece of trim that's stuck onto the wall. It's just, directly attached onto the drywall. Those are applied moldings, and this is what's really popular these days. These boxes, you can get different styles, different patterns, and they get attached to the wall. Raised panel molding, the difference is that there's actually a board, and I will show you this on my screen, on my camera. So you've got a board on the wall, and then this is a panel molding. So you can see how it has a space here for a panel to fit inside of it, like that. So this is actually the right one that goes with it. So this piece gets applied onto the wall, and then the panel molding goes on both edges, and that's what you can see in this image. Right here is you have a panel, the rails and stiles, like what I'm holding, and then you have a panel molding on each side. And that's what gives this, the higher end look, because we've added more detail, it's more elegant, it's more elevated. That's a raised panel molding. And once again, to go to here, an applied molding is a much simpler design. Okay, so the next term is a butt joint. So a butt joint, that's what the term is, because they're just two pieces of wood that are butted together. So it could be at a 90-degree angle, or it could be square, and those are just joined together. So if you're doing any paneling with square stock, we're going to have butt joints. And we're going to talk about those later, because it's important how we deal with these joints to make sure that it looks good. And the other one I will show you is a miter joint. So if you've ever done any baseboard or any casing, you've probably had to cut some miter joints. And a miter just means 45 degrees. So here's another example. These are two pieces. This is going to be a miter joint, which means that two 45-degree angles make 90 degrees. And then we can see that again on this piece of trim, miter joint, 45 degrees. And on any picture frame molding, that's what we're going to have as well. It's going to be made up of miter joints. So now getting into, so let's just check in. How's everyone doing? Is everyone following along? Is this making sense? Going over terminology? Okay, great. So now we're going to go over some different styles of walls, different styles of wall panelings. So wainscoting is what you see here. It's a general term. This applies to any partial height wall paneling. So anything that's halfway up the wall, we're going to call that wainscoting. So the design could be different. We could have lots of different styles, but the main thing is that it doesn't go all the way up to the ceiling. That wouldn't be wainscoting anymore. Typical, it could be the bottom third, or it could be halfway up the wall. If you want to, be in proper proportion, you want to do 1/3 or even 1/5 of the way up the wall if you have a higher ceiling. So wainscoting. Then here we have some Regency wall paneling. So this takes its inspiration from drawing rooms from Regency villas. And you can see here, this has a large panel. So inside is the panel. And also the rails and the stiles are quite thick. And in this picture, we can see it has a molding, so an inset molding on the inside of this panel. So, it's a little elevated. It's more elegant. It's not just your basic wall panelings. And then at the top here, like we discussed earlier, we have chair rail that's going across. And Regency, this can be all the way up to the ceiling. In this case, they didn't. They just stopped it halfway up the wall. But you could do this, if you're going for a English castle, English manor, country manor look, then you could do Regency paneling all the way up to the ceiling. You could do it in solid wood. That's Regency. And then raised paneling. So this one we talked about in the other slide there. This is another example on a column. And you can see how these outside edges are raised. There's quite a bit of depth. So the raised paneling, that's the difference, is that it has depth. And also in this picture, you can see that there's paneling on the inside. So it's not just applied onto the drywall. There's not drywall on the inside of this panel. That's actually made of MDF. In older cases, it would have been made out of wood panels, solid wood panels. So that's the difference between a raised paneling and just an applied molding, is that the actual wall. And you can even see in the background here that wainscoting also has material on the inside. So it's not just a drywall finish. And then this style is called Jacobean. And that term, not everybody's going to use that term. This type of look really is synonymous with wall paneling. So if people say, yeah, we're going to do some wall paneling, they might call it square wall paneling. This is the look that they might be talking about. So, and this goes very well anywhere, because you can see this house we did, this is very modern style, and this worked great. We did this in a bunch of feature walls, actually going all the way down the staircase walls on the 3 floors. You could put this in a traditional, even a country farmhouse style. This is going to work very well sort of anywhere, because it just looks great. And if you've noticed, if you look behind me, that's what I have back here as well, is Jacobean paneling. They would call it square paneling, just applied onto the walls. Okay, and then Georgian. So Georgian, it's designed to look like a button bead type. So you have wide boards applied onto the wall. You have these wide boards, and you can see the joint in between them. And this is inspired by period properties, obviously from like Georgian period. And they can have a V groove, or they could have a square groove. And these ones actually have a round over in between all the boards. that is Georgian style. And this, again, this could go all the way to the ceiling. If I was doing this one, I would have even wider boards, and you could go all the way up to the ceiling. And this is more of a classical look. It's less, you see this less in modern. And here we have Edwardian, and this is really a shaker look. So shaker usually refers to very simple. So just square paneling, square edges. It's a very simple look, very clean. You know, this can look, you can make it look mid-century modern. You could make it look just modern if you do it right. Yeah, that gives you the shaker look. And once again, this works pretty well in most places. And then you can always dress it up. So we can always add the raised paneling to this type of molding. If you say, oh, I don't want it to look that plain, then you can dress this up with some raised panel moldings. Now, this is another very popular, which I mentioned before, is just applied molding. So that's just taking a trim. So something like this, you know, you build your picture frames. Some people refer to it as picture frame molding, because if you look at it, it almost looks like there's just picture frames attached to the wall. And this one is prior to painting, so this will all get painted in. But also very popular. This works in a lot of places. A lot of people will do this in their bedrooms. You can do hallways, kitchens, really accent wall anywhere where you want to add a little bit of detail, some interest to an otherwise boring wall. This one, they chose to add some crown molding, but applied moldings are also very popular. Abstract walls. This is more of a newer development, and you can actually get pretty wild with this. And you'll get a bunch of ideas for this in the inspiration guide that we're going to send you. It has a whole bunch of like modern abstract designs. And yeah, this is definitely a more modern look. And this one, again, is made up just of 45-degree angles. So you come up with a random pattern intersecting 45-degree lines. That gives you your abstract wall. Another one that people like, and this is pretty timeless, is shiplap. So shiplap is a specific type of board. It's called shiplap actually because when people were building ships, they would have boards that have an overlap, so that there's a groove where the boards can overlap, and that's what they would use on the hull of a ship. So modern shiplap, you know, I wouldn't use it to build a boat, but it does look nice. This is a washroom we did. And it can look really nice anywhere. Some people will do their entire houses. You know, you do your whole kitchen, especially in more of a country style. You can do shiplap. But again, this works everywhere. And I know in the United States, it's very popular in the Northeast United States. You'll see some houses, and you know, I'd say 75% of the houses is done in shiplap. If it's done right, it looks very sharp. And the other popular one are fluted panels. So let me show you a sample. These ones you might have seen. They're all over Instagram and Pinterest. And I'll share my screen. So this is what it looks like. So it's a panel, and these come prefabricated, which is really nice because it makes installation simpler. And in this case, we have MDF. So it's not solid wood, it's MDF, but it has a veneer on the outside edge. And these veneers you can get in different colors. So here we've got one in a walnut. This one is just a gray. Technical gray is the color. And what's interesting about these is on the back side is an acoustic panel. So this is sound absorbing. And we have this here in the office where we record a podcast as well. And that acts as sound dampening. So it's really nice if you have a really big living room, maybe even TV where you're watching TV in an echoey room. You know, if there's not a lot of drapery, there's not a lot of sound absorbing materials in there already, then this can really make rooms sound less echoey. So a lot of people choose it for that specifically. And yeah, it's become very popular, modern style. You see this, you know, in offices, even for the commercial look, are fluted panels. And they don't have to have the acoustics on them. You can also get them. WUPC is a wood plastic composite. And so the whole thing is plastic, and those ones you'll see they're selling online all over the place. So out of those, what's trending? What we're seeing a lot of is people like the abstract designs, right? The modern design. Wainscoting is coming back. We're seeing a lot of wainscoting all over the place. The fluted panels, like I mentioned, So those panels, the acoustic panels, those are becoming popular, and the applied moldings or the picture frames. So out of all those, do you have any favorites? Which one did you like? Did you like so far out of all those different designs? You can post in the chat there. If you're going to pick one, or maybe you already had the inspiration beforehand, what you're going to pick, we can put that in there. Applied moldings. Okay, well that's good because we're going to go over exactly how you can do those. So where to start? What is the right trim? There's so many options. You go into Home Depot and there's 2-3 aisles full of different types of trim. What do you actually need? How are you going to decide what you need? Well, it's a lot simpler than people think. All of the walls basically that you've seen here, apart from the fluted panels, can be made using these. So I'm gonna walk you through these different parts. So 1x3. This is 1x3. This is just a square board. And the interesting thing about lumber, if you don't know this already, when they say 1x3, they mean 1 inch by 3 inches. But that was the dimension before they milled this down. So this is actually 2.5 inches by 1/2 inch. And yeah, if you get 1x3, it might be 5/8, might be 5/8 thick or 3/4, because traditionally when you had solid wood, they would give you the dimensions of the raw, the unfinished lumber, and then you have to run it through a mill to flatten it down. So a 2x4, that's why a 2x4 is 3.5 by 1.5, because they sold you, yeah, this used to be a 2x4, but we straightened it out for you. So now it's 1.5 by 3.5. So 1x3, that's what this is made out of back here, that Jacobian paneling. We have the raised panel molding I showed you. This adds, some elegance to any panel. You can put this on the 1x3. The chair rail, if you want to do wainscoting, the chair rail, and there's a few different styles of this that you can use. We have the inset molding. Do I have it over here? An inset molding can go on the inside of your panel. So if this is your wall, this is your wall, and we want to make this a little nicer, you can put this molding on the edge of your rails and stiles. And now, it's not as heavy as a raised panel molding, and the raised one is called raised because it comes out on top of this inset panel molding. And then, so Janet there mentioned she's into the applied moldings. So this is a pencil mold, and let's check. So comparing it to a pencil, it's quite small. It's very thin. So this is a small trim detail, but these look very good if they're done right. And then a little bit bigger than that, if the space is bigger and you want to do applied moldings or the picture frame moldings, you can use a batten. So these would be considered battens, and that's more of like classical profile on this batten. We have the acoustic panels. Once again, you can just use casing, so square stock casing. And here we've got some pine battens, which is just a very small, it's almost like the pencil molding. It's just a very small batten. You can use those in a few different places. And that's all you need, really. So now we can get into the tools. So I'll go down the list, and we're going to talk about this more as we go through the process of installing. Generally, this is the bare minimum that you're going to need. So a miter saw. You want to cut. Yes, you want to have a miter saw. People talk about, yeah, I have my hand saw and a little miter box. That maybe your grandpa passed down to you. I would say that's almost not even worthwhile, because it's really hard to get accurate cuts, especially when you need to make miter joints. It's going to be hard to get accurate cuts if you're cutting them by hand, and because you're going to have to make so many cuts, it's just going to take way too long. So you're going to need a miter saw. That's what we're using for cutting. Caulking gun, definitely in almost every case we're going to be doing some caulking, so you need the caulking gun. Miter bond, I'll show you that after. That's a glue, and it's a special glue that we can use. It makes this really easy. It makes making miter joints very easy. We're going to need a level, a pencil, Olfa knife, that's just a utility knife, and a nailer. So let's talk about nailers for nailing into the wall. So I have some different options to show you, and really you're going to need to decide between two, because now in the modern age, we're blessed that we have cordless nailers. So this is an 18 gauge brad nailer, and you can see it's battery powered. So I plug a battery into here. There's no hoses, there's no wires. I can run around to my wall, shoot nails into the wall. This is a 23 gauge pin nailer. So let's have a look at these nails. These are brad nails. They're very small nails. They come in a strip, and you can just see there's a little head on these. If the camera can focus. So it's just a very small nail. Will come out one at a time, and this will hold material together, and it does a very good job. However, if I was installing this pencil molding and I shot these big, you saw the size of these nails. If I shoot these big nails through here, what's going to happen is that the wood is going to split. So I don't use the 18 gauge for these small moldings. I use a 23 gauge, and maybe contrary to logic, 23 gauge is smaller than 18 gauge. And these don't have heads. These are just pins. That's all they are. And they're very, very fine. So these ones I can shoot through my pencil molding, no problem. They're not gonna, blow it out or cause it to split, but they are gonna hold it long enough for my glue to dry, which is the goal. So the other option is between cordless and pneumatic. So this is a pneumatic nailer, which means it's air powered. You need to plug this into an air hose and into an air compressor. It does the same thing. It shoots the same 18 gauge nails, but this one is air powered. And this is where, well, let's talk about deciding which one you're going to get in a minute. We'll talk about the rest of the tools that we need first here. Finishing. So when it comes to finishing, that's getting the wall ready for paint. Everything in between installation and paint, there's a whole list of things. So we need to sand. So we're going to need sanding sponge, drop sheets because it gets a little messy. We're going to need a sanding block, some putty, some filler, and ideally an orbital sander, especially if we're doing paneling with a flat stock like we have behind me. And then finally you get to painting. Oh, hang on, let me show you the slide. Okay, so we have finishing, drop sheet, sanding sponge, sanding block, putty, orbital sander. Painting, you're going to want some painter's tape, the brush, paint, roller cage, roller, paint tray liners. So how much experience do we have painting in the group here? You can comment if if you have some experience painting, if you're more confident painting than you are installing, or if maybe it's the same between both. In any case, we'll go over those details as well. So now we'll come to supplies. So glue, we're going to want carpenter's glue. This is what it looks like. It's almost like yellow glue that or white glue your kids have at school, but any carpenter's glue, this is going to be perfectly fine. Caulking, this is my favorite. You just go to Home Depot. This is Alex Flex is what it's called. And this has a lot of flexibility, which is important because when we apply these moldings to the wall, these are made of wood, your wall is made of drywall. Through the heat and cold cycles and increase and decrease in humidity over the seasons, your wall is going to expand and contract, and the drywall expands and contracts at a different rate than the wood. So what ends up happening is that you get cracks in your caulking. So that's why we want to have something flexible when we're doing the caulking. For filler, there's two that I recommend. Dynapatch Pro, and I've gone through, trust me, a dozen different fillers to find one that works very well. This is very good. You can get this at Home Depot or Famo wood filler. You can get that one on Amazon. It's also very good, and we'll send you links to those as well. So if you need to, if you're ready to go after this, you want to start your project, you'll have a list there, and you can say, yep, just click on it on Amazon. Let's get it going. Then some sandpaper, 100 grit, 180 grit, and nails. You're going to want to decide, do I need 18 gauge nails or 23 gauge nails? Depending on what project you have in mind, you can decide on those. So like I mentioned, there's the miter saw, an orbital sander. You're going to want a sander, especially for the butt joints. So if you've got a big miter joint like this or a butt joint, then you're going to want an orbital sander. And that means an electric sander, you plug it in, you just Velcro the sandpaper on. That's really going to help you out and make your sanding faster, especially on big walls. However, you don't need that if you're just doing small little trims. If you're doing the applied moldings, like Janet said she wants to do, then you don't need the sander. So, and as I mentioned, you're going to decide between one nailer or the other, and I'll help you make that decision. So if you already have an air compressor, if your neighbor, if you know somebody who has an air compressor, then I would say get a pneumatic, because those are much more affordable. And that's a good idea. If not, and you have to decide, so now you have to decide between buying an air compressor and a pneumatic nailer, or just a cordless nailer. In that case, I'd recommend get the cordless nailer, because they're quiet. You don't have to drag around air hoses. You don't have to worry about setting up the air pressure and lubricating it. So I do recommend the cordless ones, and you can get one for the price of an air compressor and a brad nailer and a pneumatic nailer. And there is some other options, however. If you're only planning on doing one accent wall, you don't have to go out and buy all of the tools. You could borrow. You could go to your neighbor. You know some handy people. Hey, can I borrow your tools for some time? And you might not know about this. There's tool libraries, and what this is, it's almost, well, like a library, but there's toy libraries for kids, so you don't have to keep buying toys for your kids. There's tool libraries. So you don't have to keep buying tools. You can just go in there. You might put a deposit down. A lot of them are actually free, or maybe a small donation. You can borrow the tool for X amount of time. So if you're not planning to do a lot of projects and get really heavy into DIY and renovations, then look in and see if locally you have any tool libraries, because that could be a great option. And I will mention, if you're borrowing tools, there's some etiquette, because I've lent out a lot of tools. I got a shop full of tools back here, and there's some people that I won't lend my tools to again. So if you do borrow some tools, make sure of this: return them in better condition than you found them, and then you're definitely going to be invited, to bring them back. And also be mindful of how long you have the tools for. A lot of people will get all ready to start a project, and then something comes up and they can't start it. But if you borrow the tool from somebody who uses it regularly, they're going to be wondering, oh no, where's my miter saw? Maybe they use it for work, or maybe it's a hobby. So make sure you just tell people, hey, I'm going to need your tool for another week. Is that okay, or do you want me to bring it back for you? That is a little bit of tool etiquette. And in terms of bringing it back better than you found it, clean it up if it's dusty. If it's a saw, you could put a new blade on the saw. People will appreciate that. If it's a sander, maybe you buy them some more sandpaper to go with it, and that way you'll be able to borrow tools again and again. So here we have the cordless sander, the miter saw. There is a lot of options for miter saws. Something else you can do if you want to, save some money is you can go on Facebook Marketplace. There's a lot of used tools on Facebook Marketplace. If you're confident to go check out a saw, and you can get them on there, probably half the price. So the other supply I mentioned was Instant Bond. So this is, let me show you. This is a cyanoacrylate glue, and this is super helpful. It's this one here. It's a two-part glue. So there's an accelerator or an activator, and then the actual glue, which is the cyanoacrylate. And this is what we're going to use to make our miter joints. So I would say, very important to have that CA glue. You can get this at Home Depot. We'll also put a link. You can get that online as well. And that's these two parts here. And I'm actually going to show you how to use this later, because that is key. And there's some different strategies for making sure that works out well. Okay, so let me go to next here. Okay, so laying out our accent wall. Here's the steps. So let's go through the steps. You want to measure your wall, obviously. Figure out what wall you're going to do. Write this down. Get your length and height, and any obstacles. So maybe there's a door. You want to measure to the edges of the door. Make sure you have that all documented. Then you're going to draw it out. So we're going to do it on paper, and we can draw out exactly what the wall is going to look like. Then we need to do some math. So if we're doing, the Jacobian paneling, the wainscoting, we want to figure out where those rails and stiles are going to go. So there's going to be some math involved. Don't worry, it's pretty easy. You want to check your math, right? Measure twice, cut once. That's not what I say. I say measure 5 or 6 times, cut once. You really want to check you got it right the first time, because once you start cutting, you don't want to be gluing boards back together. And then lay it out. And what I mean by lay it out is that we're actually going to lay it out on our wall so that you can see exactly how it's going to look on the wall. And another option is to use our calculator. That one will help you get started. So let's go through. What we're going to do now is go through an actual example. So the example here is going to be the Jacobian paneling in a room. So this is our scenario. We have a 12-foot wide by 8-foot tall wall. It'd be around the same as this. We're going to use the 2.5 inch by 1/2 inch trim. So let's go into here. Everybody see this tab all right? And what I'm going to do here is we're going to draw it. So this is, let me tell you about this program. This is Google SketchUp. This is a free online app. It's a very, a simple, straightforward design app. I use this a lot, even in my business. There's a professional version, but everything I'm going to do here, you can also do this on paper. So you could just follow along and imagine that we're going to do this on paper. So this is going to be my wall, and we want it to be 8 feet by 12 feet. So let's pretend that this is the wall that I've just measured. So now we're going to start laying out, and to get a rough idea before, so I know what wall looks like, and I know we're doing the Jacobian paneling. We want it to look like this. So now we have to figure out how many of these squares are going to fit nicely in our wall. And this is where our app comes in. So this is a handy app, and let me just clear it off. So can everybody see this all right? You can see the app. Does that look good? So in here, I'm going to put our width 144 inches, that's 12 feet, and our height 96 inches. And let's pretend that we have a baseboard, and the baseboard is 4.5 inches tall. So now we have the baseboard here, and we're going to choose the accent style is square paneling. And let's try some different layouts with this. So how many panels? Do we want 8 panels? No, that doesn't really look good. Let me refresh this. There's some weird spots in there. Okay, so we've got our baseboard, our wall, our baseboard, our accent style. So horizontally, we have 3 panels going across. That's not going to look good, 4-foot panels. So, let's say maybe 8. Okay, 8 panels going across horizontally. I think that looks a little bit too busy. So let's scale that back and say, what if we do 6 going across? Okay, this looks better. I like 6 panels horizontally, but now we have these weird gaps at the top and the bottom. So what I can do here is switch this to vertical. And when we had 6 horizontally, we had 4 going across vertically. Now, I think on a 12-foot wall, I think this is going to look pretty good. So 6 panels across, 4 panels going up the top. So this is just to get an idea, and we can also, we could do this. We do this with wainscoting as well, but that's going to give us a pretty good idea of what we want our wall to look like. So we said 6 across and 4 up. So now we go into SketchUp here, and we're gonna draw this. And again, this is what you're drawing on your piece of paper. So we have our baseboard going up. Now we know we're going to do a frame coming all the way around, and we know that this is 2.5 inches on each side. and we're going to be at the top, and we're also going to be above the baseboard. This is an important detail because if you just butt into the baseboard, that's not going to look good. So we start with this frame coming all the way around. Now we have to do the math, and we have to figure out on this 12-foot wall exactly what is our 6 foot, our 6 panels, what's their size going to be. So let me I'll bring up a calculator. Right, so we have 144 inches, and if we have 6 panels, there's going to be 7 vertical stiles. So basically, we're going to do 144 minus 7 times 2.5 inches, because each of those stiles is 2.5 inches. That gives us, oh, hang on. And what I love about carpentry is that, you only really need a grade 6 math comprehension level to be a good carpenter. 2.5 times 7. Right, so we got 126 and a half. And now we can divide that into our 6 panels. And we know that each of our panels is going to be 21.08 inches. So 0.08 inches, I'm not worried about that. So we're going to say 21. So now we can come across here and we can say 21 inches and 2.5 inches. And I can just keep repeating this across. And this is going to give me the visual of exactly how my wall is going to look. And then the last one, 21, is pretty close. There might be, we got a little more than 1/2 inch of a gap there. I can live with that. And now we can do the same thing going up. And here I'm going to start from the bottom because I know that vertically these aren't going to line up perfectly with the top of my wall, which is normal. So at the last box, we have 16 inches instead of 21. I like that look. I think it's going to be nice just with smaller boxes above. So now I'm just going to skip and fast forward. So this is what our finished wall is going to look like. So we have our baseboard, we have our paneling coming all the way around, and that's our layout. So you can do the same thing, if you're doing picture frame moldings, decide your dimensions, lay it out on a piece of paper. You can, if you're good with technology, you can use this app, and it's nice because now I can use the measuring tape function here and figure out how long all of these pieces I need. And this is important because the next step is going to be to make a cut list. So the cut list is what I'm going to take to my saw so that I can, I can properly cut all of the pieces that I'm going to need. I don't want to have to go to the wall every time and measure and then cut and then measure and then cut. So instead, I'm going to write out this checklist of all the pieces that I need, and I only have to cut everything once, and then I can go to the wall and install it. So let me show you on here. On this drawing, we have, I didn't show you where the joints are in the wood. So this is what it'll look like once it's painted. What I did here is I have a drawing showing where the intersections are. So you can see here, I have my horizontal pieces going wall to wall. So these ones go right the whole way across. And then I have my vertical pieces. So I'm going to have 2 long pieces, top and bottom. I'm going to have 7 vertical pieces, my stiles. And the rails, these are going to end up being just short little 21-inch rails coming across here. So my cut list is going to look like I need 2 pieces that are 12 feet. I need 7 pieces that are going to be 86 and a half, based on the total height of my wall. And I need 18 pieces that are 21 inches. And like you can see behind me, those are going to make up each of these rails. So let's get back into the presentation. Just open up the right tab. Okay. Okay, so now we have our layout. So you've got your piece of paper, and this is documenting how everything is going to look. Oh, I'm showing you the piece of paper, but you can't see me. So your piece of paper, that's going to show you how everything's going to look. So now we can actually get to the wall and you can start working. First thing, before anything else, grab some sandpaper, grab your sander, sand the wall. I'm going to do this with 180 grit or 200 grit sandpaper. And this is a secret. I don't know if, I haven't met lots of people who have been taught this, but I learned from some very good painters. Especially when a wall has had multiple coats of paints over the years, it starts to orange peel. And that means that there's small imperfections on the wall, and every time a coat of paint is added, it gets a little bit worse. That imperfection becomes more and more noticeable. And you can see this with what people call the landlord special, student housing, where there's just all coat and coat and coat of paint, and it does not look good. So the purpose of sanding the wall is to smooth out that unevenness. And now when you apply your new paint, it's going to look way better. So the entire wall, I'm just going to sand it. Here I have a vacuum hooked up to my sander, which is really convenient to avoid the dust. Otherwise, put up some plastic, painter's plastic, and some drop sheets, get your wall sanded. And also patch any holes. So you want to, this is the part where you want to patch any holes if you need some drywall repairs. Now you want to do your layout. So we're going to use a level. Okay, I got 4-foot level here, and your tape measure. And according to your drawing, because you've already prepared the drawing, you've already figured out your proportions, you can lay it out that way. If you have a really long wall and you don't want to, lay it out 4 feet at a time, then you can use a chalk line. So the chalk line is what it sounds like. It's a string covered in chalk, and you can hold this at one end on the line that you measured out, have somebody else go to the other end, hold it there, and then you just pull it tight, snap the chalk line, and that's going to leave a line on your wall. You can also, if you can't find any help, if you can't rope anybody into helping you with your accent wall, you can just put a nail through this end, put a little nail into the wall, then run your line, and you can snap it by yourself. And what you use is chalk, and you can see this chalk, it's level 1 of permanency is number 1. So you can just wipe it off. So it's not gonna make a huge mess. You can also, right, and so here's my rough drawing of this wall, and this is what actually became the wall behind me. You can use the app. You could even print out a picture from the app, and write all your dimensions on there from Google SketchUp and lay out right onto the wall. You can use lasers. What's really nice is that these lasers are available now, and they're very affordable. You can go on Amazon and you can get one for, under $100, and they're auto leveling. So the laser is always going to be perfectly plumb. That is perfectly straight up and down and horizontal. So you can use that. You can use one of these guys to lay out your lines, and I use this all the time. It's super convenient. They used to be, $600 for a decent laser, but now, $70 can get you one on Amazon. So if you're, you think you might use it elsewhere, if you have one or if you can borrow one, lasers are great. And the other thing, let's go back here. When you're laying out, you want to draw the entire pattern onto your wall, because that way you'll be able to visualize and say, hey, is this actually going to look good? Is this proportion okay? Do I want to adjust this? So both sides of the lines, wherever your trims are going to be, we're going to draw those right onto the wall. Okay, so now it's time to cut your trims. So you've got all your walls laid out. You have your cut list. You know what you need to cut. So let's watch a little video. I'm going to warn you, the volume on these videos comes out very loud. So I'll give you a couple seconds. Turn your volume down a little bit, because otherwise, somebody will say, hey, is there a saw running there by your computer? Because these are loud. So this is cutting some trims. So here I'm putting miters into a batten, and this is for an applied molding. So the miter is the 45-degree angle. So I'm setting my saw at 45 degrees. And what's important is to always keep the back of the batten on the fence. So that vertical part of the miter saw, that's called the fence. And I'm always going to keep the back edge of my battens against the fence while I'm cutting my miters. That way I make sure I cut the right angle. And Okay, you can't see anything? Okay, let's see. Did anyone else see the video? Okay, you can see that? Yeah, so here I'm putting the miters. That's where I'm putting the miters into the battens. Now I'm going to put them back to back, because instead of measuring each one, I can just measure the first one, and I know I need to cut 10 of these. So I'm just going to transfer my measurement, and then I can cut the next window. And with a picture frame, you can know that you always want to have the, let me show you the bit in person here. So this is my batten. So this is the outside of my batten, and you can tell because the thick part always goes on the outside. So just like a door casing, if you go look at your door casings, if they're not square, they're going to have the thick part on the outside and the thin part on the inside. So when I'm cutting this batten, I'm always going to keep this part against my fence, and then I'm going to come in, and my miters are always going to be to the inside. They're going to be facing each other. So if I was to miter this side, it's going to look like this. I don't need to draw a line all the way across, because I just need to know what the outside dimension is. I put my mark here. I set the saw to 45 degrees, and then I can chop that off. And this is going to make the next part of my miter. So make sure that the outside is against your fence. That's going to be key when you're cutting your trims. Okay, so yeah, next we're going to look at installing these. So actually, we need to glue them up as well. So once you have all of your trims cut, you have your cut list, you say, yep, I got all of these are all ready to go. Now we need to glue them up. So there's two ways we're going to glue. One of them is the butt joint. The butt joint, which looks like this, it might be 90 degrees, or it might be end to end like this. These ones we're going to use wood glue, because there's a big surface area here, and we're going to be attaching these to the wall as the glue dries. We're going to use the wood glue, put a little bit on each side, and keep these as tight as possible. So if you're doing this style of wall behind me, wood glue, you do the butt joints. Now, this is the fun part. For miter joints with the miter bond, let's do a little live demo. These ones, as much as possible, you want to pre-glue your miters. What that means, you want to glue them not on the wall. So I'm going to glue this right in front of you. So this is the CA glue. I put this onto one edge, right? So you can see here, I got glue. And this is actually a spray, this activator. So I spray it onto the opposite edge. And now I like to do this on a flat, but I'm just going to do it in the air so you can see. Now I just hold these together, and we're going to count to 10. 9, 8, 7. So the nice part about this is what the activator does is this makes an instant bond. That's why it's called instant bond. So 10 seconds, you hold this joint, and that's it. It's glued. I can swing this around. Very convenient. This saves a lot of time. So that's why I'm such a huge fan of miter bond. Has anybody used miter bond before? You put in the comments if you've used this, or if this is the first time seeing it, and your mind is blown. Oh wow, I didn't know we could do that. Instant joints. Okay, so we got some yes and some no. So that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna do for these miter joints as much as possible. So I'll show you another video on what it looks like to glue up an entire box. And these ones I just do on the bench. So you can put, if you can't see the video, then put it in the comments. So here with these little battens, and it's that quick. So you spray one side, glue the other side. It's very convenient. So if you're doing applied moldings, you can just find a flat surface to prepare these on and just glue them all together. And it's really nice to do it on a flat surface. You see how I slide it a little bit after I glue it up? That's so it doesn't get glued to the table. And then the fourth piece of your box, that's the tricky one because you have two sides and both of the sides are going to glue in 10 seconds. So if you have another set of hands, that's ideal. But like you see here, I just line them both up. And I would recommend wearing some gloves your first time doing this because it's very sticky. Your fingers will stick together. So, just grab a pair of rubber gloves, latex gloves. But then you have your picture frame, and see how quick that was? It's already ready to go. Like that's ready to go. I can stick it on the wall. Super, super convenient. So that's you've now learned the magic of miter bond. That's a carpenter's secret. So once you have all of those ready, so your joints, your miter joints are glued up. Now we're ready to install these on the wall. Actually, let's go into another video. So this one that I just made. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody can see this because it seems to be working. So this is my wall. I'm pretending I have my layout line here, and I measured. I know where the edge of my box is going to be, my picture frame box. Now, this is where I take the wood glue, and I just do a little bead of wood glue. That's all you need around the back of the picture frame. And what actually holds all of these moldings on the wall is the glue. The nails, their main purpose is just to hold the glue, hold the moldings on the wall until the glue dries. So here, I'm going to shoot nails about every 6 to 12 inches, and especially in the corners, because I don't want those corner joints to come apart. And since I know my box is square, I know that it's going to be vertical. As long as I lined up that horizontal line, I know that it's going to be vertical. So even though, so yes, to answer your question, it will damage the wall if you remove them. That's one of the costs of doing an accent wall is you're going to have nail holes in it, and the glue is going to take some of the drywall off. So that is something to keep in mind. So make sure you like your design before you finalize, before you install. But the idea here is, we're going to help you come up with such a nice design that you won't want to get rid of it. You'll want to keep it there. So now we've got our trims. They're all installed onto the walls. And here's what that might look like. So the Jacobian paneling, you can see this guy all the way around. Those are installed. We have our rails here. We have our stiles here. And we're getting there. We're not done yet, but we're almost there. So now is the time to fill the holes and the joints. So this is where we take our putty. We talked about Dynapatch. And here's the real-time demo. So here I've got my applied moldings, my picture frame. This is what your 18 gauge nail holes are going to look like. They're going to look like that. So on some of these, I've already put my filler on. So I just wipe it on with my finger, and I just left it to dry like that. It dries pretty hard, dries in a few hours. Then what you can do is you're going to take your sanding sponge, because this will conform to the shape of my molding, and we're just going to sand that down until it's flat. If you don't have a sanding sponge, you can also just use a piece of sandpaper. So piece of sandpaper, sand that down. So now if you look, you almost can't tell where it was. Where was it? Here. Right. It was right here. So you can't even see it right there. And in some cases, if you didn't fill it all the way up, then you'll be able to see it. In that case, just coat it again and then sand it again. So sometimes you'll fill it twice, but that's what we're going to do all the way around the edges of our trim. With our butt joints or our mudder joints, these are the ones where we want to sand. So these ones are on the wall, and I'll show you what that looks like. Imagining this miter joint is on the wall, you want to sand that to be flat, because even this one that I glued up, just holding it in the air, it's not perfectly flat. And if your drywall isn't perfectly even, which it's often not, then these joints might not line up. So we want to sand that out until you can run your fingers across and those ones feel perfectly flat. So once you've got all your filler sanded out, you filled all those holes, you got it sanded out, you used your sanding sponge and your orbital. Now we are ready to move on to the next step, which is caulking. This is very important, because this is going to make your wall look really good versus just okay. Especially on drywall, there's always going to be just a little gap in between your trim and your drywall, because drywall isn't actually flat. They do a good job of making it look like it's flat, but it's not really. So there's going to be different gaps, and we want to fill those with caulking. Caulking tube, you take your knife, you cut the tip off. You take a pin. Most caulking guns have a pin that you can use to pierce the seal that's inside the tube. You can look and see if your tube of caulking actually has a seal in here that you need to puncture. And then you can squeeze this out. The secret is you want to put the minimum amount of caulking on. That's the one mistake I see people make the most, is that they just use way too much caulking, then they wipe it off, it gets everywhere. You want to use the bare minimum to fill that hole. Then you run your finger down across and take off any excess. I've used those different, little caulking tools, little trim details. I think the best tool is finger. This is the best that I've ever found. Just run your finger. It washes off with soap and water. So you keep a towel in your other hand, wipe off your finger, caulk the next section, smooth it out, wipe off your finger, keep going like that. This is going to look really good. Once it comes to painting, this is going to make a difference and make your wall look a lot better. And here, we can talk about this when we get into painting. But you want to let your caulking dry overnight. And I'll full screen this so you can see. When we did this, you can see there's some dust collected here because we had to do a lot of sanding to flatten these out. You want to make sure that you've cleaned up the dust before you do the caulking, because otherwise it's going to mix in with your caulking and it won't be smooth, and that'll make a mess. So make sure your wall is clean before you do the caulking. So once that's all done, now we're ready to paint. We're almost there. With paint, there's a few notes that you want to keep in mind. So one of the important, quite important things is, let me keep this full screen. Very important is prep. That's the key with painting, is preparation. So you're going to want to grab some painter's tape, green painter's tape. This is what you use along the edges where you need to cut. So on the corners of the wall, so here, if this wall is a different color, that means I need to cut in my paint all along this edge. And cutting means making a straight line. The easiest way to do that is with tape. So you put the tape on the side you don't need to paint. You can paint over top of it, and then you pull the tape off. You want to be careful and make sure that you use painter's tape, because other tapes, like heavier duty tapes, can take the paint off your wall. Especially builders. Builders tend to use cheaper paint, and it's much easier for that to come right off the wall, and then you're going to have to do more paint repairs. So use some proper painter's tape. You can run that all the way around your border. Then what you're going to want to use for painting is anywhere that you have a flat surface. So flat surface such as these, you'll use a small roller. This is a 4-inch roller, because this gives you a nice finish along any flat areas, a roller is going to give you a nicer finish than a paintbrush. If you have a bigger area, like the panels, like the inside of these panels, there you want to use a full size, a 12-inch roller. So you're going to want a 4-inch roller, a 12-inch roller, and then a paintbrush. The paintbrush is going to be for all of these inside corners. So you get in there with your brush, and you want to roll as much as you can and only brush the areas where you're not able to get in with a roller. And yeah, wipe down the wall beforehand, put some drop sheets down. Paint will splatter. It will splatter off the roller, so you don't want to get that on the floor. Wear some old clothes because it's going to splatter on you. And you want to start with primer. This is something that a lot of people miss, and it ends up making their walls look bad. So here, let me show you this. Here, where we've sanded the primer off of the trim, most of our trim, it has primer already on it. That's why it's white. Otherwise, it would be MDF brown. Here, we sanded the primer off. If I just go over top of this with my finished color, especially if it's a light color, then that is going to show through. You're going to see that difference between the dark and the light part of that trim. So it's very important. You want to use primer, not just regular paint, because otherwise, if you're using regular wall paint, you might have to do 5 or 6 coats to cover what primer can cover in just one coat. So those areas, you want to make sure you prime. Any edges that you've cut that are exposed. So like this is an icicle style wall, and this would be a bunch of cut edges. So those ones you want to prime as well. And then you can do your finish coat over everything. And the easiest way to paint, to finish an accent wall, is to paint it all the same color. If you decide, hey, I want the background to be a different color than the foreground, now you've just, put in miles and miles of cutting that you need to do, and you need to cut on the edge profile of your trims. So you're going to be cutting on this small edge, which is hard to do. It's not doable. You can definitely do it, and if you get into that, I would recommend a sprayer. You can mask it off. You can use a sprayer. That's more advanced. So for now, I would say, especially with your first accent wall, paint everything the same color. It doesn't have to be the original wall color, but just paint everything the same. Then that's gonna make your life easier. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end here. So thanks for bearing in here with me. I hope you've been taking lots of notes, learning lots. I know I'm throwing a bunch of information at you. Here's some more common mistakes to avoid. Not using nails. Some people, you go on YouTube and you can see, people will just tape their moldings onto the wall. The reason why I don't tape moldings onto the wall, it comes down again to the drywall being warped. And also, if you're using small MDF moldings, they get noodly. So it's more like spaghetti than wood, which means that they're not going to stay straight. And if you just tape them to the wall, they might not remain flat against the wall. And now you're going to have a lot of caulking to do. And that's not going to look great. So I always recommend nails and glue. You're going to have a solid moldings. It's going to stay there for a long time. You can appreciate it. So use the nails and the glue. Not gluing miters. This is essential. And that comes back to the expansion and contraction issue. So if I just nail these two pieces onto the wall and hope that they stay tight here, that's very unlikely that they're going to stay looking this nice. So you definitely want to glue your miters. Not using caulking is another one. If you just, think, oh, the paint will fill in the gaps, it's not really going to. It's going to look like your wall somebody painted over the gaps, and there's still going to be gaps. So you definitely want to use caulking. It takes a little bit at a time, but that's definitely worth it to give you a nice final finished product. Not sanding the wall is the other one. I will even sand in between coats. If you want, sort of a glass smooth finish, I'll sand in between coats of paint. Make sure that they have, the appropriate dry time in between coats, but that gives you a nicer finish. If there's any little flecks, pieces of dust that get in there on your first coat, then those will come off with just a very, very light sanding. Wrong filler joint material. This gets a lot of people. So if I have a butt joint, so let's pretend I have a butt joint here, like this. So this is my butt joint. because these trims, they have a little bit of a curve on each end. That means that the curve is going to show up in between here and here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a little bit of a gap there. And you need to fill that. And you want to make sure to fill that with the Dynapatch. You want to use this guy. And let me full size here so I can talk to you straight. You want to use this to fill any butt joints. You don't want to use caulking. What's the reason for that? Because this is sandable. Caulking is not sandable. And you need to sand those butt joints to flatten them out. If you put caulking on top of it and you try and sand it, it's going to make a mess because caulking has silicone in it, and it's more like a glue. It's not sandable. So you definitely want to use this on your butt joints and to fill your nail holes. And you want to use caulking anywhere where you need a smooth line because this stuff is not smooth like caulking. So you need to be able to sand that, and you can't sand it if you put it on those small edges. So you want to make sure you use the right filler material. And then proportions. So I didn't have enough time here to talk about proportions today, but I mentioned it at the beginning. That's very important, for things to look appropriate. And, the ancient Romans, the reason why millions of people go to Rome to appreciate their architecture is because they figured out a system that looks appropriate. And, I love to read about this stuff. I get excited about this. There's different architects figured out their proportions that they have. And even Leonardo da Vinci talks about the proportions relate to the scale of the human body. So then that architecture has the same proportion, the distance between your mouth and your eyes and your head and your height is all related. And the closer you have to those natural proportions that occur in nature, the more appropriate your trims are going to look. You've probably walked into some people's houses and said, yeah, they tried to do it nice, but something is off. You might even not be able to tell, but you just know there's something off about this, and that's scale and proportion. So you want to, we can talk about that later, but you want to double check your proportions. And this is a big one. This, if you go to the Home Depot, they're going to sell you Drydex. I do not recommend this for filling butt joints, for filling nail holes. Why? Because it shrinks. This stuff, it's nice because it changes colors, but it'll shrink. And if you just sand it and leave it, it can cause problems over time. So the Dynapatch dries a lot harder than Drydex. So that's definitely what I recommend is not using this stuff. So I want to know any questions? How's everyone feeling now on a scale of 1 to 10? How are you feeling about your level of knowledge about accent walls? You can post in the chat here. What are we at? Awesome. 9. That's a big jump. That's great. Good to hear. So, what was your biggest takeaways? What's something that's valuable that you learned? Okay, tools, styles. Awesome. That's great. I'm very glad you're taking something away here for that you can apply. So, was there any questions? Anyone have questions you want to post? Any questions at all? I'll give people some time to type out some questions. Yes, we will give you a link to the app for sure. You can use that to lay out. So there's two. There's the one is called Panel Perfect. That's our app. That one right now it just does square paneling and wainscoting. You can use that for layout. The other one is called SketchUp, and SketchUp. That one you can even go on YouTube, and there's some intros to that. Yes, we'll send you links to both of them. And on SketchUp, there's some tutorials as well for that. Awesome. Yes, and and we'll send you. You'll get an email with all of those links and all of the documents and the PDFs for there. All right. Any other questions? Any like tool questions? I can run into the shop and show you if you need to see how something else looks, or what specific tool I would recommend buying. And there is a difference. Professionally, I'll choose one type of tool, and for a DIY, for a homeowner, yes, that's a good question. What miter saw would I recommend? So let me bring up the link here. So there's two different saws I would recommend. So let's just have a look here on Amazon. So a DeWalt miter saw, this is the best, hands down. DeWalt makes the best miter saws. They've been doing it a very long time. They know what they're doing. These are very heavy duty. You can see it's all aluminum, heavy saws. But that's overkill for if you're doing one project a year maybe. This is going to be more than you need. I use these because they're very durable. I can drag them around to job sites and to people's homes. That's fine. That's more than you need. So you could look at, King Canada. These are sort of maybe like lower tier. Even Wen is one of the sort of the budget Amazon brands. Let's show you this one. So rather than the 270 from the DeWalt, or what was it, 470. So $200, you can get one of these. You can go into Canadian Tire, find one of these on sale, and they're gonna do a perfectly good job for what you need. Check out the reviews. The reviews on this are still good. What you might need to do is get a new blade. So this comes with a general purpose blade. If you're cutting wood trims, this type of blade might be too aggressive. So you see how it says 40T? I would get a new blade. You can get them as well as Home Depot. You can go on Amazon. I would get a 60 or an 80 tooth, and it's called a fine finish blade. And that's what I would recommend. So those ones are good. Let me come back to the chat here. I would also, you see how this is a sliding miter saw? Sliding, that means that it gives you extra capacity to make extra long cuts, which you don't necessarily need to do. So if I'm cutting, some really big trims, I want that sliding capacity. But if you're just making, using these small moldings, you don't have to have that sliding function. So let's see what's available here. Let me go. Let's go have a look at Home Depot. Oh, that doesn't like my browser. Okay, so yeah, if you have a look out for sales, I've gotten a miter saw for $100 at Rona, and they were having a clearance. And yeah, like I said, you put a new blade on it, and that's perfectly fine. And the other thing is where you set up. So if you can set up your saw in a garage, you really want to be as close as you can to where you're working. So it is going to be dusty. So let's go price. Let's see what do they have under $200. Ryobi, yeah, this would do the trick. See how these ones don't slide. This is cordless, comes with a battery. Yeah, something like this would be adequate as well. 179, or you go on Facebook Marketplace and look on Facebook Marketplace. So hopefully that answers the miter saw question. Anything else? Oh, and the pin nailer. So pin nailer, the question there is, do you already have an air compressor? So if you don't already have an air compressor, then I would say get a cordless one, because then all you have to do is charge up a battery. You don't have to mess with the hoses and all of that. Ryobi, they do affordable tools. Their target is the DIY, the homeowner. They have affordable stuff. Let me see if I can find this one. Okay, so this here, Ryobi Airstrike. These ones go on sale as well, so I would get one of these. But you're going to want to make sure you get it with a battery. So if you already have batteries, if you already have a battery tool, then I would look for one that's the same. That way you don't have to get the kit with the batteries. But you can get the Airstrike nailer. And as long as you're not doing huge trims, you could do the 23 gauge. You know, if you're doing applied moldings, even like this, I would use the 23 gauge pin nailer. Unless you're getting into something really heavy duty, then you don't have to have, you don't necessarily have to have the 18 gauge. So let's have a look on Amazon. Yeah, let me share this one. So this is what I would choose as the DeWalt, but this is the Bear tool, this one here. You can get a Craftsman 18 gauge. It comes with a battery, comes with a nailer. I would say that is a good option. Craftsman, and then they have lots of other tools. So eventually, you know, maybe you want to get a cordless sander, then you can pick that up and you don't have to get a battery because you already have the battery. So these ones also go on sale. So Craftsman, 18 gauge, yeah, that would work as well. And then 18 gauge, as long as you're not doing little pencil moldings, then I would get the 18 gauge nailer, because that'll do the battens. If you want to do chair rail, you know, if you're doing some picture frame boxes with a chair rail below it, you can do those as well. Okay, any other questions before we finish off? Those were some good questions about tools. That is the biggest question. And the other one is Facebook Marketplace. You can have a look on Facebook Marketplace, because there's some good tools there. Okay, it looks like we're good on questions. So, oh yeah, I have one more slide. We have a full course I want to introduce you to. So we're also going to put on a full, this is a video course. So this is already pre-made, multiple modules with the steps for everything. You know, if you really need the instruction, if you need to, you know, you're at a 7, you're at a 5, and you need to go to a 10 or a 9 before you start working on your walls, then this is going to be the detailed walkthrough. So you'll have video, you'll have written instructions, how to get through, you know, building your own accent wall. The things that we didn't have time to cover here, like scale and proportion, where to get the best deals on lumber, you know, even how to budget for the accent walls you want to do, how to decide where to put the accent walls, using checklists to avoid 1,000 trips to Home Depot, how to do your accent wall without having to buy a miter saw, how to estimate properly for all your materials, avoid overpaying for tools, avoid overpaying for materials, more details on how to do calculations for all the different types of accent walls, how to deal with your baseboard, you know, how to tie into the baseboard appropriately when you're doing the accent wall, how to, you know, list up your cuts and do batch cuts. So we will include that as well. We'll do an offer for everyone who's on the webinar, for, you know, early bird access to this course. So for anyone who needs, you know, that extra helping hand, very detailed instructions. And the other thing is, you can make money doing accent walls for other people. You know, if if you start out as your hobby and you say, hey, this was a lot of fun. Now I have the tools. Why not, do a couple of accent walls on the weekend? Because our accent walls will charge, between $2,000 to $6,000 for the average accent wall that we install. A lot of them are more detailed, but yeah, it can even be a revenue generating opportunity. So just want to put that out there for anyone who's interested. But otherwise, if there's no questions, then I will end the broadcast. So thanks everyone for joining. You'll get the email, like we mentioned, with all the resources. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Calgary Custom Concepts. We post lots of tips and tricks there. And let us know, send us a message, send us a DM on Instagram and say, hey, I'm starting my accent wall. If you have questions, send a DM there. That'd be great to see your photos and see what you do with the new knowledge that you've gained here. So thanks everyone for joining. All right. Take care. Have a great evening.